It's better? That's better. There we go. Welcome, everybody. I'm Kylie Lethbridge. I'm the General Manager for the Independent Brewers Association. So welcome to all our members and all our industry people that aren't members. This is my first Good Beer Week and my first trade hub, so super exciting and have loved, watching and hearing. So I've learnt quite a lot, including the quality workshop this morning. It was fantastic. So Scott and I today are going to have a conversation with you guys and give you some resources and some tips and tricks about how to engage with government. And when we talk about government, we're kind of talking at a federal level, at a state level and at a local level because, engagement is super important, particularly if you're trying to get grants. If you're trying to work through development applications or planning permits, super essential that you engage first before you even kind of take that first step in talking to, banks or anybody about what you're trying to achieve. My background before I came to the IBA was with government, so I worked most recently in local government helping businesses get through the planning system. So I was in economic development. My whole job was to create jobs, and so we worked again with state and federal government, and I've also worked at the other end in handing out grants. So what I'm going to do is give you some ideas about how to engage with government from a grants perspective. We'll talk about, again, some planning issues. We'll give you some resources. I'm going to have a chat to you about how the IBA can help if and when you need to engage with government. And then Scott's going to give you some real-life examples of how important it is to get that engagement and how that government support and help can translate to benefit to your business, grant funding, awareness, and maybe having things a little easier, go through the planning system a little easier. One of the things that has taken up quite a lot of my time at the IBA in the last 12 months is writing letters of support and helping our members get through planning systems. Because you're a head brewer or because you know how to run a business, it doesn't necessarily mean you know how to navigate government or the planning system. So we're increasingly being called on to provide that resource, and which is why we thought it was helpful to have that topic on the panel this Good Beer Week, and we'll also be talking about it at BrewCon in August as well. So hopefully we'll see everybody again there. So basically, I'll make the technological process work. There we go. So this particular next couple of slides are really about business development and grants. So if you're thinking that you might want to start talking to government, there's a few things that you'll need to do. And one is just to have a general overview of your business. So they'll be wanting to know, they'll be asking you some questions that you might not want to give up in terms of information. They'll be talking to you about your annual turnover. They'll want to know number of employees. They'll want to know, tax obligations and things like, how well your business has gone, how solvent you are, and where you're going from there. They want to know if you've got a business plan. Again, that gives them some surety that you are on a trajectory in terms of knowing what you're doing and being able to, receive and manage a grant. It's a big part of their trust system. And when you go to them, you might have a big bright idea, but you need some well thought out objectives, and even that doesn't always happen. From my perspective, I would have somebody come in and say we want to spend 300 million and we want to do it here and we want to do it here, but the concepts were very, very pie in the sky at that point. So you really need to try and get down to the nub of what do I want to do first, then what, then where, and where do I want to go from that. Where you can and where you have the ability, if you're drought, fire or flood affected, steal a huge amount of resources, and that will give you priority, and that will, put you up on the list above others that might not be able to claim that. What you also need to do when you're setting out those objectives is to talk about what benefits there are. Essentially what you're doing is asking for taxpayers' money. So you need to say to them, these are the things that we're going to do to create jobs, to create economic benefit in small country towns, regional areas or cities. So they want to know that their investment is going to create economic benefit for their state or the nation. And they'll need to scream, loud and clear about that. So you've got to provide that information. And again, they'll work with you to do some of that analysis, but you still need the information before you go in there. One of the most important things, which again Scott will add to, is you need to look at their strategies and their policies. So if you're working with the South Australian State Government or the Victorian State Government and you're looking for grants for a new canning line or innovation in technology from the manufacturing perspective, or if you're looking for grants for a new development, you need to look at their own objectives. So their economic development policies, their tourism policies, if you want to build a new tap room and you want some grant funding, you need to look at their objectives for the visitor economy and where their visitor experiences strategies are going. We've just done a really exciting piece of work in New South Wales with Destination New South Wales onboarding breweries and creating some trails. And again, that has come about from their own strategies and also having a craft independent beer action plan in place in New South Wales. So that's driven a lot of resource, and the breweries that we're working with in New South Wales are going and underpinning those strategies, and that's that huge amount of resources are coming our way from that. So once you've done all of that, then I think it's important that as where you can, and IBA members will get this information from us. We repurpose a lot of government information into either our state mailers or our general mailers if they're relevant to the federal government. But it's also really helpful that you sign up for these yourselves. There'll be grants that we miss, and some of them are super easy to get. Some of them are, support for business planning, and those are, again, costs you will need to absorb yourself. So if you can get some support from that, even better. And where, again, you need to sort of think outside the square. So even though you might be thinking tourism, basically breweries are classified as manufacturers. So you need to have a look at the manufacturing side of grants or innovation or technology. And again, I've got kind of a few slides at the end that give you some of those locations of where those grants are, as well as some really good websites that are grant finders and a government support that comes with that. And research, the more research that you can have that helps justify your case, the better. Again, find statements in their own plans and policies that align to what you're trying to achieve. And again, where you can, and it's a must, is engage with your local member of parliament. If it's a federal grant, obviously you need to talk to your federal member. Local members of parliament, state are really important, but the local government is really important as well to engage with. They have a remit to support you.
Look, I can give an example of what Kyle was just talking about. Last year with COVID, there was some grant funding around to make businesses more COVID safe, and so we looked at, there must be something we can do here to utilise access to funds. Our packaging line is in a very tight area, so we were able to make the argument that by buying a new line conveniently that spreads it out into a straight line, was more COVID safe. And so they provided half the funding for that new line, right? $130,000 straight off the bat. So, sometimes you do need to be quite imaginative about how you interpret it and then the argument that you make to apply for that funding.
It's a very good example. Yeah, it's a very good example.
Pretty proud of that one.
Very good. And that, there is so much money out there. From a state, even local sometimes a little bit harder. Sometimes it's not worth the money to get it. But, there is a huge amount of money out there if you can look and tailor your project into the guidelines, as I said before. One, again, and I think Scotty will reiterate this, is you have to have a relationship manager. So if you're looking for a federal government, grant, then you need to go to Oz Industry or you need to go to Austrade, and you need to buddy. You need to have a buddy. Their remit, again, is to support you and to award grants and projects that basically meet their own aims and objectives, and they're measured on that themselves. So having a relationship manager, if you try and go in cold, it's very, very difficult, and they will help you craft your application to their own guidelines. Again, think about, what it is and where you're going. So as I've said there, if it's tourism, you need to go and find somebody in the product development team or the industry development team. It differs in each state, but again, we can help you with that because that's the world I come from. Again, if you're considering export, and this is something that is coming at independent brewers thick and fast at the minute, is opportunities to export. It's very challenging, I understand. I get a lot of calls that says, somebody's asking me to put 2 cases of beer on a ship to Taiwan, what do I do? I don't know if they're bona fide, and so Austrade is a really good support mechanism to tell you whether or not, and to help you get to the point where you might want to export. It comes with a whole lot of requirements in terms of labelling and lots of different stuff. So if you're thinking about exporting, knock on Austrade's door well and truly before you even go down the path. And again, business planning. There's lots of support for business planning, and it's pretty essential, particularly having long-term plans. When you look at the growth of our industry, they'll help you get there. One of the things, again, we'll add to, I'm sure, is if you're looking for to do a development and you need to go through local government town planning, start with the economic development team, not the town planning team. Because if you go in fresh, enthusiastic, they'll find 100 ways sometimes for you to not do what you want to do. Whereas the economic development team, if they're good, will work through it with you. They'll go and liaise on the planning department on your behalf. They'll go and talk to engineers. They'll go and talk to the building department. They'll come back and they'll help curate your idea through the process. For me, the learnings that I achieved through helping business do that is it just saves you costs. So if you can get understanding of what they're going to slam on you from an engineering perspective, if you're going to have 58 conditions on your planning permit, it's really good to know before where you might need to spend some time mitigating. It'll also save you on consultants' fees and planning town planners. So the more help you can get in formulating your project with the council and relevant members there, the better the outcome will be. The less timely, you won't end up in administrative tribunals, and you won't often end up at war with the community either.
Yeah, certainly liaising with council is one of the most important first steps that you can do, because they're the ones that are going to let you do it, pretty much. So, I can't understate how important that is to start with that.
And again, knowing. No, if you're growing, if you're developing a new tap room, if you're coming out of an industrial estate into, the zoning's different, the planning scheme in every state is different. We're doing, again, some work in New South Wales trying to deal with their artisan licence that was a bit of an issue, and so the overlays, and again, that's where getting in at the beginning will help save you costs and time in the end. From a perspective of grants and that engagement that we were talking about and the liaison with your community and your local politicians, I thought it was helpful to tell you what not to do as well as what to do. And again, the experience that I've seen is when businesses try and manage too many grants at once. So they'll have a grab for that looks sexy and that looks exciting, but then it's too much to manage. The requirements to manage a grant are quite significant, reporting milestones and keeping to time. So my advice to you is, manage one at a time, do that, then go on to the next one. Sometimes you can get alignment to state and federal. You can get funding from both for a project. Again, if you can do that, that's amazing. However, it'll be a lot to manage. So you need to dedicate somebody in your team to make sure those reporting milestones and the other bits and pieces are done. Or you can, as I've said here, you can end up on a blacklist. So if you mismanage government money, you can end up on a list that means you're probably not going to get any support from that, ever
and I'll
again.
just add to that, once you have proven that you can capably manage grant funding, then you're much more likely to get it in future too. So, even if you can manage a small grant to start with, that can really kind of put you ahead of the pack when it comes to down the track managing bigger grants. So it's definitely something to, even if something seems it's insignificant, if you can show that you can do that, then that will certainly help.
One of the other things that comes from working with through this system is quite often, for example, if if Scott's working with Tourism Victoria, they work very closely with Global Victoria, who are the trade team, and they work very closely with Business Victoria. And so other things will come from it. So all of a sudden, because you're on their radar, you get a trade for mill opportunity, or you get a media for mill opportunity, or Tourism Victoria puts you, front and centre on one of their campaigns. Sailor's Grave in Gippsland is a really good example of that happening, and I'm not sure if anybody's seen the video that Tourism Vic did, but it's beautiful. And it tells the story wonderfully, and at the production values are amazing. That came from them being on their radar and engaging with the organisation. So other benefit comes from having government know about you.
That's right. And you've got to remember, this is government investing in you. So anything that goes wrong, they are going to look bad for supporting. Anything that goes really well and, shows that they're creating jobs and things like that is good for the politicians that are giving you the money. So you kind of need to suck up to them and show that you can actually spend their money wisely.
Yeah. As I've said here, don't underestimate costs and timelines. So where you might have done this before in the past and just absorbed extra costs along the way, that will be challenging in this process. So, I would maybe overestimate rather than underestimate. And, if you're considering a development that they're funding that includes stainless needing to come from another country, put an extra 6 months on. They're very understanding quite often of those kind of things, but try and scope it as best you can, because global pandemics and things like that come along, and who knows what happens from there. And as the last point is really important is no fibbing. Be really super open and honest with your relationship manager. As I've said here, they've got skin in the game, so they will always help you to meet those grant obligations. And from the outset, they'll help you get the grant if they believe in the project. If they can tick their own KPIs, they'll always help you work through this. So it's really important that when you get one, that you really maintain that relationship, because then, as Scott said, the next grant that comes along, they'll ring you and say, guess what's coming? Tourism infrastructure pipeline or modern manufacturing. You ready for it? You got any opportunity? And so lots of benefit will come from that. So we can, we've got a whole heap of time for questions after this, but where we can help, where the Independent Brewers Association can help our members in this space, is direction. So where, you can ring me and say, we want to put a canning line in. Do you have any idea of where those grant opportunities might be? And we can direct you in the right space. We can also introduce you to the right people. We did quite a significant amount of advocacy when the federal government were developing their new roadmaps under the modern manufacturing strategy. Prior to that, independent beer or beer in general was really not on anybody's radar in the federal government in terms of a strategy or policy position. We did a huge amount of work in the last 12 months to build relationships. That means we're now considered an important asset under the food and beverage roadmap, which means we've got access to a whole lot more funding and resources and support that comes from that. So last round of modern manufacturing, 3 independent brewers were successful in getting funding from that program. I know I wrote 11 letters of support for the last round. So the word's getting out that that's a good opportunity. The federal government submissions are far more detailed. You almost have to sell your firstborn child to get the money, but they're a lot of work, but there can be a lot of benefit at the end of that. So again, if you've got a concept and you want to give me a shout, you're welcome to. Same with the applications. They can be very onerous, and because you're an expert marketer or an expert brewer or you've run a business, it doesn't necessarily mean that you can understand the language that government funding applications or government policies or strategies use. So again, we can help debunk some of that. We've just done quite a significant research piece on the economic impact of our industry and the benefits, the jobs that we've created, and we've got data at now a national level, a state level and a regional level, because there's quite a lot of money in regional. There's quite a lot more money in regional anyway. we can help. I can help with research. We also get access to, excuse me, which we release to members, is IRI data and other tourism data and things like that I repurpose and make available to our members. So happy to provide that level of support as well. As I said, letters of support. I can't tell you how many I've done in 12 months, either for planning permits. I've actually stood up at council meetings and tried to support a development which sadly didn't happen because the community were challenged with any kind of development. But letters of support for grant applications and things like that I'm happy to do. Assistance with planning permits and engagement, because I have that experience. That's more of a service that we're offering now, and happy to help liaise with local government or try and dispel the language or try and give some tips about what to do first and who to go to. And again, a connectivity, Karina mentioned it this morning. We can say, you know, I know that these guys went through that in Queensland, so how about you give Dave a ring, or how about you give, you know, Peter a ring, because they've all been through this. Excuse me, wastewater. This is happening a lot lately in the brewery space in terms of wastewater management is being much more of a focus for water authorities and local government lately in every state, it seems. So we're having to get our head around, okay, what does the IBA do? What resources and what help can we provide when it comes to dealing with wastewater management?
And a lot of regional water authorities have never dealt with craft breweries before. So, you know, like we flew under the radar for the first 10 years or so, and then when we built our new facility, they turned around and said, we think we need to look at this. So, you know, and then that was obviously a huge expense to us, which, you know, needs to be, and that's fine. But just being aware of what needs to be done for that, you know, and the industry's changed. So, you know, you need to manage things differently than we used to.
And they absolutely, you're right, they don't have their head around breweries and how that works, and you know, Stone and Wood have had to just go through this, and so they're saying to me, you know, Kylie, this is a big thing, you guys need to be aware of it. And
and when they don't know about something, they take the maximum, you know, level, like they go overboard, making sure they're not missing anything. So you kind of have to jump over more hoops than you would if you had an established industry.
Yeah. And so some of the things we're doing to help in that space is we're working with the Western Australian Brewers Association and the Department of Primary Industries before it gets to be an issue to create a code of conduct for wastewater management. That's an opportunity that we can, because it's only new. We're not doing that in every state because obviously that's, you know, there's some instances where it's already happening. So where we can, if there's an issue with government, and we know it's a problem for our members, we get in and try and provide resources, information. I go to government on their behalf and see where we can make some influence and have some input into the solutions. We'll put this on our website, because I'm just about to run through 3 slides of, you know, helpful websites. But again, resources. There's quite a number in this space, but you can also get very lost in this space. So I've got a few up here that are helpful, and I know I've had some success with breweries going to this one or that one in the past. Modern Manufacturing Initiative, that's the one I was talking about before, that they topped it up with $270 million, and I think that will continue. So that's a really good one to have a look at, because it covers the gamut of what you guys do as a brewery. Oz Industry, Oz Trade, and Scott's going to talk about Oz Industry in a tick, because they're an extremely valuable resource. IBA are actually working with them to get some funding at the minute. So even our organisation, you know, have taken the opportunity to use some of these resources. Federal departments of industry and business, you could literally go down a rabbit hole looking at all of the grant opportunities that are available through both of those sites. And as we said before, you know, they'll say, we've got grants for technology. That's about innovation in business. So, you know, perfect for brewery operations. Research and development as well. There's a huge amount of funding and support available for R&D, particularly if it generates a broader industry impact. Austrade I've got there as well, and there's a few specific. The entrepreneur program is a really good one, and that's the one we're looking at for an IBA project. Export Market Development Grant, EMDG grants are generally pretty easy to access, and again, that's if you're looking at export, and it'll help you cover up to 50% of your costs in that space. CSIRO, wouldn't maybe think that that's a normal, a logical place to go, but as I said, they've got a fund called Removing Roadblocks to Innovation. So again, technology, improved brewery operations. Grant Finder is the one that I said will be helpful. State departments, they've all got a remit to support business, and all of these have got newsletters that you can sign up to. So I would recommend that you do that. But again, think outside the square. So some state governments have got invest specific departments, and that will be. They've got quite a significant amount of funding there for capital. And others, again, think outside the square. Sustainability, water management, things like that come under sustainability. Improving energy use, so solar, and lots of regional breweries are still operating off gas bottles. So lots of opportunity there to improve your environmental impact, but also to reduce some of your costs. And we're doing a project at the minute. The IBA is doing a project with South Australia Green Industries. Yeah, got quite a lot of resources there to help businesses as well as industry organisations like ours. And local government. There's many local government authorities or associations have small grants, some of them for street furniture for your tap room, some of them for, improvements to parking, or, the one I've given there is an example of a small business grant that the City of Melbourne have. 5, 10, 20 grand, still helpful if you're having to, make sure every cent counts. Again, as I've said there, think outside the square. So we'll put this on our website. This is being recorded, so people can access this later on down the track. But I'm really keen for you to hear from Scott about how some of these things actually translate into real life.
Yeah, sure. So, we started 16 years ago, 15, we're coming up to our 15-year anniversary for our venue, so that's when we built it, but we started working on the brewery 2 years before that. And I think I was fortunate that my wife was really organised, and she said, right, well, if you want to start a brewery, you're writing a business plan. Let's start with writing a business plan. So we did that, right? And you have to have that, especially, if you're a new business, if you're an established business, it's easy to say, oh, look, we've got this business and we just need this little edge up to, to improve things and provide more employment and all that sort of thing, So lend us some, give us some money. But when you're a new business, it's really hard. What were your thoughts? Yeah, well, I don't know how we did it, but we managed to get 2 separate grants to start our business, okay? And I just put it down to the amazing work that my wife did. She was it, John knows Fiona, and she was just amazing at being super organised and just, communicating with people, and so we ended up getting, we had a tourism grant for the venue, and I think that contributed 150,000 to the development of the site. And then we had a manufacturing grant that helped us to purchase the brewing equipment. So those two, I think that was around $250,000. So we had, without any business experience, okay? But we had a really solid plan. And, I look at that plan now and I'm like, well, yeah, we did nothing like that. It was complete, we had no idea what we were talking about, but at least we had a starting point, okay? And I think, too, we managed to convince the people who were making these decisions that we were so passionate about it that one way or another, we would make this happen. And, that included talking to bank managers and making sure we had assurance from them that they'd lend us the money that we needed to actually go through with it and the steps that needed. And I guess, so that starting point was really positive for us. I think what it really meant is that we were really under pressure to make it work. Okay, like you can't let something fail when you, like, not only had we, like, we'd invested our complete personal life savings in it as well. We'd taken on a huge amount of debt, and we had this expectation from government that, but we also had a pretty good plan of what we wanted to do, and we felt that it was there was a future in what we wanted to do. So, I guess we really were completely focused on what we were doing, and it was interesting because there were some other established businesses in the area that had achieved some of the same grant funding, and one of them was to start a cheesery at a winery in about 100 kilometres from us, and it was quite interesting because that cheesery opened, and then about 18 months later it closed, and so all of the funding that went to that was basically just dissipated into that business, and it wasn't received well by the politicians who were deciding on where that funding would go. So that kind of made us, we really need to make this work. So I think we put a lot of pressure on ourselves.
That was at the start of the business?
Right at the start.
So how's it been since 15 years later?
So that was at the start of the
Yep.
business. So how's it been now? 15 years on, do you still find now you're the poster child for the grants?
Yeah, look, I certainly think we have a profile now that does make it easier for us to achieve grant funding. Unfortunately, my wife passed away 7 years ago now, and so, she was the expert at consolidating this data, and like all of the reports that we, a local tourism report saying, we're going to focus on cycling as a main draw card. Things like that. She'd bring all that type of information together and consolidate it into one grant application that said, this is how, when you give us $500,000, this is how we're going to give that back to you. Like this is the benefit to
Meet your
our
own
community.
objectives.
Exactly,
Yeah.
right? So I've had to kind of bring that into my way of thinking now, and we're really just trying to get that flow going again, I guess. So there is kind of a momentum to it. Once you can do it, then it makes it easier when you're trying to get additional funding. You also need to be very prepared for it. So, we had some funding come up at the start of last year, some tourism-related cycling funding. So. And we had an idea of a project that we wanted to do, but we hadn't really had the chance to do the planning for it. So, and a lot of this grant funding, you've got a window of 3 to 6 months to actually get your application in and get it happening. So, it can help to have plans for what you want to do. So, if you want to, especially if you want to build something, if you've got at least some conceptual architectural plans, and preferably a planning permit from the local council.
High-level quotes.
Yeah, and quotations, like actually having a realistic costing for what this project's going to take. It's going to make it much easier to get that funding. So that's sort of what our focus is on at the moment, thinking, right, what projects would we like to do in the next, 2 to 3 years, and being prepared for those so that if the grant funding comes along, we can go, oh, well, we've got this ready to go. Here's our plan. This is how much money we need. This is what it's going to achieve. If you can go in with all that information, it just makes it so much easier to actually get grant funding when it does become available. And if it doesn't become available, then you've got a plan that you can work with further down the track, and you know where you're heading. So it's really, it comes into your planning for your business. It's very easy to just deal with the day-to-day problems that crop up, and there's certainly plenty of those with running a brewery, to get tied up in those. But if you can spend that time planning for where you want to be down the track, then it certainly helps with funding.
Did you want to talk about the Oz Industry stuff?
Yes.
Yeah.
So we came across Oz Industry Group probably about it was a few years after we started. We were in partnership when we started, and they helped us to analyse the business. So Australian Industry Group, they have a service which I believe is government funded. Every 5 years you can have a review done under the Entrepreneurs Project, and they will come in, they'll talk to you and all your staff about where the business is at, what your objectives are. They'll help you do an analysis, and then that can lead to grant funding for a project. So 5 years ago, we went through the Entrepreneurs Program. They recommended that we do a new business plan because we hadn't done one since we started. So we invested $40,000 in engaging consultants to help us do a new business plan. And there's grant funding available under that program to cover 50% of that. So we spent $20,000 on a $40,000 project, and it gave us a brand new business plan that, we had professional help in actually pulling that together, crunching the numbers, all of that sort of thing. And when you're busy running a business, it's good to have outside help to help you do that. It's also a bit of a reality check. Then you've got a solid business plan. You can then take that and use that to apply for more grant funding, right? So we did that 5 years ago. That helped us we did that 10 years ago. That helped us to determine that our partnership wasn't working. My wife and I had a different objective to our business partners, and so it helped us to decide, right, one of us needs to buy out the other so that we can forge a path forward with a consistent approach to how we approach our business. That was 10 years ago. We did that. We bought out our partners. 5 years ago, that had all sorted itself out, and the business was at a new stage of, right, we've done that bit, bought out our partners, we've done the next bit, what's next? And that's where we realised that we wanted to, or we were able to, I guess, focus in on the fact that what we wanted to do was reduce our dependence on tourism, because things like bushfires, it can kill all your takings in the matter of a few weeks, okay? It can just ruin your year, pretty much. So that's when we decided, right, our next step is build a production brewery so that we can focus on getting our beers out into the broader community. We're less reliant on tourism, where we can rely a bit more on manufacturing. That can happen whether there's bushfires or not. So that was that process. Now we're actually back at the stage again where we're going through the Entrepreneurs Program again to look at, okay, right, what's ahead in the next 5 years for Bright Brewery?
The good thing about the Entrepreneurs Program as well is, again, your relationship manager, once you've done that business plan or once you've done the assessment of wherever it is that you're going, they'll quite often say, okay, now we'll fund 50% of implementing that part of what you've just prioritised.
That's right.
And so, and they'll also go, and I think the Food and Agricultural Network has a grant that that might be able to do this. And so they'll work with you throughout that process. And again, they're working with us to look at, I go in and I talk at them at 100 miles an hour, and they're like, I'm trying to understand what you're saying, Kylie, so I can put it into some sort of, box. And I'm like, I want a directory for indie beer nationally. And they're like, okay, well, let's talk about that under the technology platform. And so they'll absolutely work with you, and that they know everything else that's going on. They know, everything below this layer as to where they might be able to help you then implement whatever they've just funded 50% of.
That's right. Yeah, and if you've got a good relationship with them, they get to know your business, and if something comes up, they'll often send you an email and say, hey, this funding's just come up. We thought of you, and you might be interested in looking at it. Or, we might come across something that we want to do, and so you've got a point of contact. You can say, hey, do you think this is relevant to this project? Because we'd like to do it, but we can't really afford to, and it'd be nice if we had some funding to assist. Yeah.
Once you have a relationship with government and they understand that, you're doing the very best you can, and that you are striving for the same things they're striving for. Things will come. Lots of benefit comes from that. Not even just financially. The awareness raising, and I'm sure that as a result of the stuff that Scott and the business has done with the local tourism body, stuff has come from that as well that you might not have expected because you're on the radar.
Yeah, that's absolutely true.
So those that haven't been up to Bright, you really need to. I went up for the Hop Harvest Festival March, maybe, and stopped in. It was one of my first brewery visits out of isolation, so I was super excited. And an amazing... Scott's got an amazing operation up there and some really good food. The beer's not bad.
Yeah, it's not bad. We've got darker days coming up in July.
Yeah, the red ale. Maybe some questions now. Yeah.
Yep.
In regards to the grants, so firstly, we opened up our own brewery 18 months ago, well into 7 figures in debt without a single grant because we didn't know about it. So I'll try not to throw myself down the stairs on the way up. No, we could have had 400K. But in regards to grants, outside of IT and manufacturing, are there grants to invest in people? So that's one of the biggest hurdles we're finding at the moment, is the money, as we're growing at a much more rapid rate than we expected, finding the right people and having the money to pay for that is something that we're really struggling with at the moment. So are there grants to help in investing in your own people or finding new people to hop on board?
So again, you've got to craft what you're trying to achieve into their own guidelines, but there's lots under Skills Vic. Education and training is a big space that is an important space to this state government. And so there's quite a lot of resources under that. Small Business Vic has mentoring programs. That's not that expands to just not mentoring the business, but there's opportunities then to have a HR person come in and make an assessment of your team, skills audits, professional development plans. So you just have to again prioritise what you're trying to achieve. And if they won't say, here's $100,000 to employ a new marketing manager. You need to be able to say, this is the next step in our business plan. We've been doing everything ourselves. We now need to invest in brand positioning, brand awareness, and that will maybe give you some funding out the other end for a marketing resource, or to upskill some of your existing staff to go from maybe a casual kind of factory or logistics hand to doing some logistics training. So they can fund some of that. So yeah, there is. And I'm happy to point you in the right direction.
Yeah, and I'd say, start with some of these programs that are there to help the entrepreneurs, because they'll start to, point you in the right direction with some of that stuff, just helping you get organised for getting in those types of circles.
Mine was more a comment than anything else. I was just going to say that in Bright's case, it was clearly an example of doing what you said you were going to do as well, right? So while there's a lot of, you put these plans together, or you put grant applications together in a fairly sort of aspirational way. You said, this might enable this, or unlock these opportunities, or create these jobs. I think the great success in your business, Scott, has been that you've executed it. You know what I mean? And there've been all these both direct and then spillover benefits as well. You're one of the largest employers in your local area.
Like 75 staff.
75 staff.
Working in a town of 2,000. So
I remember when I joined the company, there was one full-time staff member. So yep. so what I mean is it's yeah. But what I was going to say is I also remember that there've occasionally been there's been people have been jealous of your success in these times, but you've delivered, and you've actually done what you've said that you're going to do, and there's been the direct economic upside because of it in the whole community.
One of the things we have had to deal with is other businesses in town look at you and go, oh, they're only successful because they got grant funding. That grant funding should have been going to farmers, or there's always that sort of thing. So in a small town you get that, but Yeah, I guess. But, we're employing 75 staff in town. So.
And there's also the spillover benefit. I contend that there's so many people who visit Brighton.
Absolutely, yeah. And look, that's really what my aim is. Like, I love the town that we live in, okay? We live in this gorgeous place. And when we moved there, it was a little bit sad because, we went up there for the outdoors, but the town was actually, from a tourism perspective, was actually in decline. The Chamber of Commerce there was infighting. Half the shops in town were closed. There was still tourists coming through, but it had no vibrancy to it. It was very, very seasonal. There was peak times, and then the rest of the year was just dead. And
the only reason I know Brighton is because
yeah, thanks. Yeah, awesome. I mean, that's what we love, right? And that's why we want the brewery to be part of it. Yeah,
It's called a destination experience.
You mentioned before around
Hang on.
You mentioned before about like drought relief, bushfires. 2019 being quite a severe year. We know in the wine industry, Brown Brothers was heavily affected, and Bright being close to that area. How did you combat 2019, coming out of that and then going into COVID?
Yeah, well, for us, the bushfires were 2020 because even though they started at the end of 2019, they didn't really affect us until start of January 2020. So that's how we phrase it or figure it. But you're right, it did start, and it affected a much broader area than just Bright. We were relatively lucky, but the town was evacuated for 2.5 weeks, and so we weren't really sure where we stood with that. In the end, we had insurance covered it, but we weren't sure that would happen until kind of well after COVID had actually hit. So by the time we came out of bushfires, things started to pick up again in March, and then pretty quickly it was apparent that by Easter, which is our next busiest time, so January is our first busiest time, that's when we had the bushfires and we had to evacuate. And things were just starting to pick up, and we had, and I'm thinking in March, right, I think the brewery's going to be closed by Easter, which is not going to be good because that's our other, those are the two times where we're like, right, these are the times of the year we actually make some money, which covers us for the rest of the year because it's all, in a tourism type destination, it's pretty marginal whether you can make ends meet if it's not busy. So I was kind of, I was sort of thinking, oh, what the hell are we going to do? Between the insurance payout for the bushfires and then JobKeeper, we kind of got through. And as I think most breweries did, like everyone managed to, well, not everyone, but most businesses that had their, had their shop in order, I think got through it in the end. And I think a lot of us have come out stronger for it as well. We're a bit better organised, we're more resilient, we're more creative and imaginative. We've got strategies to try and help move these things through. I'm thankful that we did start to mitigate our risk by building a production brewery 3 years ago and starting to build up our sales team and our manufacturing team and our marketing team. We realised that we were very vulnerable to the ups and downs of tourism because of bushfires. Like, we kind of had that heads up, and that's something I've got to be thankful for, is we had a heads up that we couldn't depend on tourism all the time, and we needed to mitigate those risks. So that's why we built our production brewery. That's why, we've said to government, hey, we need some help, mitigating these risks. This is what we want to do about it. This is how we'd like you to support us. And, the last 12 months have shown the value in that.
I think what we saw as well was many breweries around the country went, right, we realised we can't rely on keg sales anymore. Wholly and solely, that's where we went. We had to tip this many, litres down that. And so many that I've spoken to or I've dealt with have gone, okay, this is where we're going now. We're not going back to where we were. So the double-edged sword is it was horrible, but has helped some businesses maybe be a little more robust coming out the other end of it.
just to say, I think you guys are being really modest, getting through a whole session on engaging with government without mentioning the rebate. And I think that's a fantastic achievement for the IBA, for Kylie. Just so much hard work. I know how difficult it is to get the government to reduce tax on anything, but especially at the moment. So just big congratulations. And Scott, I wondered what that meant for your business, what that would mean going forward for the next few years, that cut in the rebate for your business.
Yeah, certainly it's a big
increase in the rebate.
Yeah.
Cut in tax, increase in the rebate.
I personally, I see it as a massive, and Kylie has done an amazing job getting that recognised and through, and it's certainly appreciated by I think all the brewers. For us, good effort.
Team effort, but thank you.
For us, what it really means is we can invest more in our business. Like invest in people. That's probably the big thing. Like the margins in beer, as everyone knows, is very slim, and so to be able to have that $350,000, I see that as like there's four qualified, talented people that we can employ in our business to help us grow. So, that's the most exciting bit for me. It means, we have 2 brewers at the moment. I'm not saying we'd employ 6 brewers, but we'd employ 4 more people who can help us to take our business to the next level, make us more professional, more organised, get our product out there and grow. Yeah.
That is a good example of engaging with government. That's the IBA engaging with government. And essentially, it's why we have an industry association. One of the reasons. And yeah, it was a long slog. It was team effort and many Zooms and calls to parliamentarians over the last 12 months. Many visits to Canberra. Good thing is, I spent a lot of time at Rich's Brewery and Lawrence's Brewery, so it's not such a bad thing. But yeah, that we were super lucky in that the time it was, and the heartening thing for me is that the amount of time and effort that went into it, the people that have reached out since the announcement, our members as well as people that haven't joined the IBA or engaged with the IBA in the past, have reached out and said, this is what it means to me. My dream of X is now a reality. I've always wanted to do this and it's now a reality. Yes, there's some concern about some potential negative impacts on the industry and we're hearing that and we're going to look at some kind of key messaging around what this means for what we would hope it means and what we would hope you guys, do with it. Obviously, it's completely up to you, but the impact is significant. And the thing for me in the last 12 months of really hard work in this space is those stories. And I love, the text messages I got that day and the emails that I've had since from, every brewery size and scale that says this is what it means for me. So for us, that's why we're here. That's why we do our job, and hopefully that's why you guys pay your dues to the IBA, that we provide you with good and valuable resources. And the next session at 3:15 is the IBA update. We're going to tell you what's next in terms of our advocacy, and we're going to tell you what's next in terms of the things that we've got on the agenda for our members and for the industry. No more questions? Good. Oh, good. No worries. Well, thanks everyone for listening. And as I said, I won't, but I'm sure Luke will help me put all this information on the website and, recording. So hope everybody has a good time and hope to catch up with you tonight at the awards.